Now, didn't Anya do great? And imagine the pressure on that young woman introducing me. You all know me. I'm the poster boy for close elections. As Anya said, I won by 312 votes. Now to give you some idea of how close that was, there are jammed in here about 10,000 people, as far as the fire marshals are concerned, 7,000 people. There. Now, see, I'm tall as Obama. Now, let's say 7,000 for the fire marshals. Now, if you divide the 2.9 million people who showed up on election day in 2008, divided by 7,000, you get approximately 400. Now, if you divide my margin, 312 by 400, you get about 3/4 of a voter. That was the margin, my margin in this room. Now, this wasn't just an exercise in math, although we Democrats do like numbers. For example, did you know that health care reform will reduce the national debt by over $100 billion during the next 10 years? And it will reduce the deficit by another $1.5 trillion in the following decade. That is according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which both Democrats and Republicans have agreed is the authority on budget numbers. Now, you wouldn't know that health care reform reduces the deficit from the campaign ads that Republicans are airing, or from those shady third-party ads. I call them shady because they're shady. They operate in the dark. Now, those ads tell you that the stimulus package was a complete failure. That's interesting, because economist Mark Zandi has done a comprehensive study of the recovery package and determined that it has created or saved over 3 million jobs, and get this, averted a depression. Averted a depression. Now, you may be thinking, why bring up this Mark Zandi? So what if some liberal economist thinks the Recovery Act averted a second Great Depression? Well, let me tell you who this Mark Zandi is. He isn't a liberal. He isn't a Democrat. Mark Zandi was John McCain's economic advisor during the 2008 presidential campaign. He testified to Congress last month, and I quote, "The stimulus was designed to short-circuit the recession and jumpstart recovery, and judging by the historic record, it did precisely that." And he went on to say, quote, "If policymakers had not acted as aggressively, the economy would still likely be mired in a depression." So, the economic advisor of the 2008 Republican presidential nominee is telling us that the Recovery Act created 3 million jobs and averted a depression. Now, I don't know about our opponents in this election, But I'd say that averting a second Great Depression is, on balance, a good thing. Now look, people are hurting. Millions of Americans are without jobs, still struggling, still losing their homes, still anxious about their futures. But let's remember how we got here. The month that President Obama took office, we lost 750,000 jobs in this country. Now, with all due respect to the president who has landed and is on his way, I think the analogy that the economy was a car in a ditch when he took office that he uses is just a little too static. Here's my analogy, which in my opinion is both more kinetic and frankly far more accurate. When the president took office, not only had the car gone into a ditch, the car had flipped over and was rolling down a steep embankment. We, the American people, were in the back seat, and the Bush administration had removed all the seat belts. So we were all flying around the interior of this car as it was rolling and flipping and careening down this steep embankment headed to a 2,000-foot cliff. And at the bottom of that cliff were jagged rocks and alligators. Now, at noon on January 20th, 2009, as the car was careening toward the cliff, George W. Bush jumped out of the car. President Bush jumped out of the car, and President Obama somehow managed to dive in through the window, take the wheel, and get control of the vehicle just inches before it went over the precipice. Then he and Congress started pushing this wreck back up the embankment. Now, you can't push a car up an embankment as fast as it careens down an embankment. But we got it going in the right direction, and slowly we've gotten ourselves up that embankment, past the ditch, up on the shoulder of the road there. That is what happened. That's where we are today. But you wouldn't know that from these ads, all these smear ads, all these deliberately misleading ads, all these ads that are paid for by organizations led by people like Karl Rove. And we don't know exactly where the money's coming from, but we can guess. From the coal companies, the big oil companies, the big multinationals that want to continue outsourcing our jobs, from the big banks that want to roll back Wall Street reform, and big insurance companies that want to roll back health care reform. Well, they may have the powerful corporations on their side, but we've got you. And that's why I talked about my recount, as painful as that is for me to relive. I know firsthand that every vote counts, and that's why we need all of you, every one of you, to work your hearts out over the next 10 days. I want you phone banking. I want you knocking on doors. Now, many of you have families. Ignore them. Get on the phones, get on the doors, talk to your neighbors, and tell them the truth. And tell them what's at stake. Are we going to go back to the policies of Karl Rove and George W. Bush? Because that's exactly what they say they're going to do. Or do we continue moving forward with the policies that not only averted a depression but invested in our future, in education and infrastructure and broadband and research and development in medicine and renewable energy? Now, who here wants to go forward? Who wants to go forward with President Barack Obama and with Amy Klobuchar and Keith Ellison and Betty McCollum and Tim Walz and Jim Obersar and Colin Peterson and Shelley Medore and Jim Meffert and Terrell Clark? And with Mark Dayton? Because that's the choice. That's the choice. It's forward or backward. And what we do, what you do in the next 10 days may very well determine which direction we go. I know because, remember, I'm the poster boy for close elections. And I know that you don't want to wake up on November 3rd and think, if I had just done a little more, if I had just listened to Al. It's up to all of us. Are we going to do it? Let President Obama hear you. He's driving here. Let him hear you. Let Minnesota hear you. Let America hear you.